Lubna Akbany is a renal dietitian. She is also a kidney transplant recipient, so she's the best kind of provider I think there is. She doesn't only talk the talk, she has walked the walk. And Lubna is the moderator of our Kidney Kin Foodies support group that is on the third Wednesday of every month. As a matter of fact, I think it would have been this afternoon, but we have this week. So we will see you again on the third Wednesday in November, Lubna. But today you're here to talk to us about pantry staples, right?
Correct.
Would you like to go ahead and do you have a presentation, or are you just going to?
I'm going to share my screen and let's see how that works out. Thank you so much, Cher, for that introduction. I am Lubna Akbany. I'm a dietitian. I have been in the business of renal nutrition for the last 25 some years. Like Cher said, I don't just talk the talk, I have walked the walk. I am a transplant recipient. I have been 14 years out with my transplant now, and I'm praying that it keeps going. Anyways, I am in private practice now. I used to work for dialysis centers, so I have seen it all. I primarily do CKD work now, which is pre-dialysis. Because as you all know, once you are on dialysis, this service is covered by your dialysis unit. Each dialysis unit has their own renal dietitian who will then help you with further your knowledge on nutrition and dialysis. This is more of a presentation which is general for everybody. You can reach out once you have gone through this. You can reach out to your individual dietitians for further information. And let's see, let me go ahead and begin. So stocking a kidney-friendly pantry is our subject for today. And we all know in this busy time and the life that we are all living, we find it very difficult to prepare healthy meals and nutritious meals. It can be very challenging on a day-to-day basis. So I thought, Laurie and I were talking, and we thought we could bring this aspect into our presentation today, where we can talk about how we can add some of the pantry articles to ease your pain. One way to feel less intimidated is to take advantage of your pantry, right? And to keep it stocked with foods that will make your kidneys happy. So not only does this take some time and energy, but it also takes thinking out, preparing meals, doing some pre-prep. And all of this will not only help you with the cost of keeping your meals within a certain limit, but it'll also decrease the amount of trips you make to the grocery store. That being said, let's move on to the next slide. So I thought we'll start with the basics of grains and starches. So bread, cereals, starches are often a staple in our pantries. Including whole grains into your kidney-friendly diet is very important. They are high in fiber, so they keep you full. They help control your blood sugar levels, and they also help reduce your cholesterol levels. To optimize your fiber intake, choose whole grains rather than refined grains, which means whole grains are like your barley, brown rice, buckwheat, bulgur, things like that. Versus when we talk about refined grains, we are talking more about white bread, white rice, things like that. But it is okay to include whole grains in a kidney diet. And the only thing I will point out at this place is know your labels. If these are not dry ingredients, and if they are coming in, say, in a can or things like that, you might want to read the labels to see, comparing the sodium content between the products, and watch out for the items with phosphate additives. Now, when on dialysis or even pre-dialysis, sometimes phosphorus becomes a big issue because your kidneys are not able to filter out these micronutrients. These then start to build up in your system, and your phosphorus levels can go high. Most of the phosphorus that you are getting from foods that naturally occur are bound in the fiber, and so 40% of it doesn't get absorbed. But we are more concerned about the additive phosphates because these are chemical in nature and they can be absorbed immediately by the blood. So keep an eye on the phosphate additives in your when you're reading labels. And of course, if your phosphorus levels are high, remember to take your binders on a regular basis. Do not skip your binders or forget your binders. When I'm talking about binders, these could be anything that is prescribed to you, from Orexia to Faslo to Renvela. Any of the above could be prescribed for you, but remember to take them. Okay? And remember, talk to your renal dietitian if you have any questions regarding whole grains and how to incorporate them into your diet. Moving on, let's tackle proteins. So there are two types of proteins, as we are all aware. Some proteins come from animal-based, which means they're coming from animals that are mammals like us, like chicken, fish, turkey, beef, eggs. These are all sources of protein that come from animals. Milk is another source. And then there are plant-based proteins, which come from plants, maybe corn, peas, edamame, tofu, beans, lentils, and things like so. So we already went through this. The animal-based proteins are usually red meat, poultry, fish, seafood, other kind of seafood, like maybe crabs or lobsters, eggs, milk and milk products. Plant-based proteins, like I mentioned earlier, comes from beans, legumes, tofu, edamame, unsalted nuts or seeds, but choose the ones that are lower in potassium than those that are high in potassium, and your renal dietitian can give you a list of those. Nut butters are a very good source of protein when it comes to getting enough protein from plant-based products. The other thing is, with plant-based eating, we have to remember that these are all very beneficial for your health, and they are also non-perishable, right? And they go very easy on your wallet because they are non-perishable. Canned beans and legumes are a convenient way to incorporate proteins, plant-based proteins, into your diet. But then again, you have to read the labels to make sure that they don't have a lot of sodium in them. So choosing those that are lower sodium products are much better. Now, what you could do is, if you're not used to eating a lot of plant-based proteins, you could start off slower and then start increasing them, introducing them slowly into your diet and gradually adding them to your meals. Now, if you have gas because of these products, they do tend to create gas in the abdomen, into the stomach. So you could take something like Gas X, or if you're cooking your beans at home, you could add a little bit of sodium bicarb when you're boiling them, and that releases a lot of the gases from those beans, and then there's less gas production in the stomach. Fruits and vegetables are another good source of keeping things. I mean, a lot of us bring fresh fruits and vegetables but are unable to consume them sometimes because maybe we live alone or we have just one or two people living at home. So it may not be the most cost-effective way of eating. So you could keep some fruits and vegetables in the pantry that may help you if you run out, say, if you run out of fresh fruits, you may have some applesauce in the pantry, or those small containers that we usually give to the children in their lunches, the 4-ounce containers of fruits, fruit cocktail or mandarin oranges or applesauce are a good source of replenishing those fruits when we don't have fresh ones at home. But make sure that these are in their own juices whenever possible. Mandarin oranges canned in water if possible. So reading labels is very, very important. Again, I can't stress that enough. Any kind of pantry items, you need to make sure that you're reading labels to make sure that they are low sodium, low sugar, especially for those who are diabetic. So keeping some canned or frozen low sodium products are also advisable. So what I do, for example, is I'll make a huge pot of, I'll boil a huge pot of beans because I eat vegetarian. And so what I would do is I'll make a big pot of, say, garbanzo beans or pinto beans. I'll boil them and then I'll make smaller containers of them, or I'll put them in Ziplocs and freeze them so that I have it ready whenever I need them. Same thing goes with your carrots, corn, green beans, peas, peaches. Again, watching the potassium for the peaches, making sure that your potassium is not too high. Canned peaches are a good substitute for fresh peaches because during the process of canning, when they are boiling these fruits and vegetables, a lot of the potassium leaches out in the water. And so you can use those ad lib, okay, if you can fit them in your diet. Moving on, we talked a little about nuts and seeds. Nut butters. Nuts and seeds are a great use to add crunch and flavor to your food. They provide us with protein, fiber, healthy fats, and you get a lot of them now in the markets. Almond butter, walnut butter, peanut butter. Now, all I will say with the peanut butters are try to get the ones that are organic, where there's not the commercial brands like your Jiffy and Peter Pan or any of those brands usually adds a lot of salt and sugar when they are processing the butters, and that's how they are so solid in nature. But if you buy the organic kind of peanut butter or nut butters, what you will see is that the oil separates from them. And then what happens is that they're not emulsified or they're not processed to look that thick. So when you're using those, you just have to mix them well and make sure that those oils go back into the butter so that they become a little more spreadable. Try adding unsalted nuts or seeds to your salads. That's a good way of getting some healthy fats into your daily routines. You could add them to your smoothies. You could add them to your trail mixes if you are going on hikes and things like that. They make very good dips. They, for raw vegetables, because a lot of us like to dip our raw vegetables in something, and the dipping sauces are very high in sodium. So dipping your vegetables in peanut butter or nut butters is a good option or alternative. You get a little more protein from them and healthy fats from them, and you're not getting all that salt. So a tip that I could give you is to build even more flavor. You could try to roast these before blending them in your salads or things like that. Okay, let's go on to herbs and spices. Herbs and spices are your friends. So these are excellent way to enhance the flavoring and the color and the aroma of the food without adding a lot of fat or salt or even sugar to your food. Aim to include a small amount of your favorite herbs and spices. This can help save space as well. I love to buy my spices from the bulk bins, and then I pack them in little Ziploc containers, or I bring them home and put them in little jars, glass jars, and label them so that I know, in like mason jars, so then I know what I have and how much of it is still there because it's visible. To make a kidney friendly meal, or you want to make a seasoning, that is, you can make your own seasonings with some of these products without adding the salt. But make sure that you're not, when you're buying your spices, if you're buying them from the store, make sure that there is no added salt or salt substitutes, because a lot of those salt substitutes are potassium based. They're potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride. And so being alert and reading the labels again is very important. Some of the herbs that I include in my food is basil, bay leaves, and you've got the list right in front of you. There's cumin, curry powder, ginger, garlic, oregano. All of these add a ton of flavor to your food, and as you start using them and get more comfortable using them, you don't miss the salt as much. Okay, so again, this is a good way of adding flavor to your foods. Another place that we get stuck and we get sauces and condiments are sometimes a weakness. So sauces and condiments can be quite high in sodium. You have to remember that, especially the Chinese sauces that we use or barbecue sauces that we use. Nutrient content claims on the label, make sure that they may say they are low in sodium, but they may still be higher than what is allowed on your diet. So a good rule of thumb for a low sodium product, if you're buying any of the sauces or condiments, a good rule of thumb is that it should contain less than 140 milligrams of per serving. 140 milligrams or less of sodium per serving in that sauce or condiment. Okay? No added salt or sodium should be on that content. When you're reading the label, when you're reading the ingredients, make sure that salt is not an ingredient that is added on it. Nutrition fact table can also tell us about the product. Aim for sauces that are less than 140 milligrams. But another good rule of thumb is anything less than 5% is okay for you to use. 5% of sodium or less is okay for you to use. Remember to look at those labels, because there are, again, hidden sources of phosphorus. They add phosphate additives to keep the shelf life of these sauces. And so make sure that when you're reading the label, anything that has in the label, when you're reading the ingredients, if it says anything with potassium or phosphate, try not to use those ingredients very often. Okay. So tahini is a very good sauce or condiment that you can use. It is made with sesame seeds, and you could do it at home yourself. It's just a paste. You just roast your sesame seeds a little bit, and you can grind them in your grinder, and it comes out pretty good. It comes as a sauce, and you can also add a little bit of oil if you don't want it very rough. You can add some olive oil to it, and it makes it a smooth. Sauce at that point. Okay, vinegar, red wine vinegar, oil, garlic, barbecue sauce. If it is low sodium, balsamic vinegar adds tons of flavor to your food. So remember, all of these are good alternatives to your sauces and condiments. Moving on, let's talk about some fats and oils that are good for you to use. So I have here, healthy oils are used for cooking and salad dressings and soups and stir fries, to put on your pasta and more. When cooking or adding oil to your dishes, be sure that these are unsaturated fats. Okay, so extra virgin olive oil is good. It adds a lot of flavor to your dishes, but it has a very high smoke point. So you cannot use it for cooking, but you can use it definitely for your salads and anything that does not require heat. Okay. It helps with reducing the inflammation in your body. It has good antioxidant effect in your body. Another oil that is good for you is sesame oil. Same thing, it adds a toasty flavor to your foods, often used in Chinese or Asian cooking. Again, the smoke point is very high, and so it smokes or it burns very easily, so it's only used as a topping rather than as a cooking. Versus sunflower oil or safflower oil or any other light flavored oils can be used. They're good with high heat, and so they're good for cooking and baking. Same thing with the canola. It's okay to use that. Okay, I'm sorry. Another tip I can give you is oils and fats that are coming from animal sources have a lot of saturated fat in them. So like, for example, lard or butter is high in saturated fat, but it's okay to use a little bit of it. Okay, just if you want to, like, I would not encourage you to use lard, but maybe a little butter. Add, if you want to add the flavor, especially if you're doing Italian cooking and you want a little bit of that flavor, you could put a small dab of butter and then add the canola oil or any other light flavored oil to cook with it then. But make sure when you're reading labels, again, oftentimes these fats are blended together, and they may have some fats like palm oil or coconut oil added to them. So just reading labels again is very, very important. Okay, next thing I thought of was snacks. A lot of us like to snack in between our meals, and so again we are reading labels, whether they're crackers or popcorn or pretzels, rice cakes. All of these are good for you to use, but make sure that they are low in sodium or unsalted. I would say avoid chocolate, since it's very high both in phosphorus as well as in potassium. So avoid doing a lot of chocolatey kind of snacks. And then again, remember to take your binders regularly with your meals as well as your snacks. If you're eating, say, a piece of fruit or just munching on some vegetables, you don't need to take your binders. But if you are eating anything like crackers or popcorn or pretzels or rice cakes, or you're putting some peanut butter with your vegetables, then you might want to add a one binder with your snack as well, because a lot of times the phosphorus goes unnoted in these items. Again, I just like to remind people that there are a lot of phosphate binders out there. You may be on any of these mentioned, maybe Auryxia, Phosrenol, Renvela, Foslo, Phosrenol, what else? There are multiple binders that are now on the market that are used and regularly used in the dialysis and pre-dialysis communities. Let's see, like we talked earlier about milk and milk products being high in phosphates and potassiums, and that they also have more proteins in them. Of course, there are a lot of plant-based milks that are now available at your grocery store, and these have lesser amount of proteins, potassium, and phosphorus and other ingredients in these milks. So generally speaking, we have seen that soy milk or rice milk or almond milk is much, much lower in potassium than cow's milk is. And the exception, of course, soy milk is slightly elevated. It may be as same amount of sodium in soy milk, same amount of potassium in soy milk as in cow's milk, but you still get a lot of benefits out of it. you may want to read again the labels as far as what the content of those milks are. If you need to limit your potassium, there are a bunch of milks out there that are much, much lower in potassium. For example, rice milk, Rice Dream being one of them. If you do use rice milk, make sure you're using just an original Rice Dream, because when they're adding the vanilla or the flavored ones usually have sugar added to them. So again, read the labels, make sure that you have this, well, you understand what kind of milk you're buying and how much of the potassium and phosphorus is in it and protein is in it, especially if you are watching out for those nutrients in your diet. So here I have another, this is my last slide. It is basically showing nutrients in the different types of milks that are available in the market. And if you see that the almond milk is very, very low in protein, it is low in sodium. It may be a little higher in sodium in certain brands, but there are other brands that are much lower in the sodium. But the potassium is much, much lower in these products. Okay, so these are some of the milks that are out there that are alternative to your cow's milk or your goat's milk. Any questions?
Thank you, Lubna. Yes, there are questions, and that was a wonderful presentation. I am hungry now.
It is lunchtime.
Every time I talk to you, I get hungry.
Well, share, you guys put me on right before lunch or after lunch.
So we do have a question. I am stage 4, and all the research I read says no whole grains or brown rice. And then she also adds on later, being at stage 4, I also researched no beans except chickpeas and no nuts. So I know the answer to this, but I want to hear your answer.
So whatever is out on the net, it does not replace what a dietitian can tell you. That's a simple story. Do not replace my the knowledge that. So anyways, cutting that short, I want to say that things that are on the net are old school. There's a lot of old school material that is still being circulated on the internet. New research actually tells us that if you lower the amount of animal-based proteins, even in stage 4, animal-based proteins go just to plant-based proteins, eating lentils, beans, whole wheat, whole grains, actually improves your kidney health. You will see that it improves the creatinine production, because like I said earlier, when you are eating plant-based foods, a lot of the nutrients are trapped in the fiber of that food. And since we as mammals do not have the ability to digest those fibers, 40% of those nutrients are not available to our body. And so right off the bat, we are not getting getting that much protein or things from it. But we get the benefit of the fiber of making us feel full, and it keeps us regulated, and it traps the cholesterol and traps sugars. So those of us who are diabetic and who are watching our cholesterol, even if you are in stage 4, it's okay to incorporate these foods in your diet. I would suggest try to find a renal dietitian and do a consult with them, and you will see the benefits of going on a plant-based diet.
Super, thank you. The next question is, can restricting electrolytes before they become an issue help prevent kidney function decline? Low serum sodium, a result of overhydration or lack of dietary sodium? That's a question.
Yes and no. So overhydration definitely could show a low sodium content in your blood, But as a rule of thumb, we just say reduce the amount, restrict the amount of sodium you are eating to 2000 milligrams across the board. And if you have, specific questions like these, you may want to address it with your dietitian or with your doctor.
Super, thank you. Here's another one. For fats, is avocado oil acceptable?
Yes, avocado oil is fine. You can use it, no problem.
Okay. With diet, it's only CKD, but also gout. Some of us need to worry about. Any advice?
So yes, uric acid buildup can be a problem with people who have gout, and some of the beans are higher in uric acid than others. So doing some research and seeing which ones are lower, like lentils are pretty low in uric acid. And again, it's okay to use. The problem, what ends up happening with uric acid is that when we are eating, we eat, say, animal protein, and we are now trying to incorporate some plant-based protein. So when you are eating, say, red meat or pork, that is very high in uric acid. And then here comes some plant-based foods like your beans and lentils, and in a mixed diet, that can become a problem. But if you are going to be only on a plant-based diet, then we have not seen that as a big issue. But when you're combining the two different types of diets, like a mixed diet may cause a high uric acid buildup. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Okay, we have time for one more. Dietitian said that mushrooms and winter squash are low in potassium. I've seen otherwise. I don't know where their information came from, but
Winter squash is not low in potassium. Winter squash is usually very high in potassium. So, like pumpkins and things like that, acorn squash or spaghetti. These squashes that usually come during the winter, which have a hard shell on them, when you cut them open, they're either orange or yellow in color. Or these are the ones that are very, very high in potassium. And generally speaking, we try to avoid these types of squashes. But your summer squashes are okay for you to use. Summer squashes being like your Italian squashes, usually your crooked neck squash, or the yellow crooked neck squash, or your the Mexican squash. These are all okay for you to use, no problem. They are low in potassium.
okay, super. Thank you. Okay, so I have a question. We have a few minutes before we have to wrap up things. You had mentioned about sodium in canned chickpeas. So can you put those in water and let the salt leach out?
Yes, I'm sorry I forgot to mention that when I was doing the canned foods. Definitely, you can. The first thing you will do is if you're using any kind of canned beans, you will drain out the liquid that they are sitting in, and wash them. And then you can soak them in clean water for about 15 to 20 minutes, because what that does is it allows sodium to leach out into that water. Salt is water soluble, so it will pull out. So, for example, if you think of it, your beans are higher in sodium and the water is low in sodium. So if you soak those beans in the water, the water will suck out the sodium from those beans, and now they are okay for you to use.
Okay, great. We do have a question in the chat. What seasonings would you recommend for Asian cooking besides sesame oil?
So a lot of times with Asian cooking, I generally tell people, you've got your soy sauce and your fish sauce, and all these things are very, very high in sodium. So I generally tell my patients to use ponzu. Ponzu is a very, very good alternative for your dipping sauces or your cooking sauces. Another thing you could do is use there are amines that are available, low sodium products that are available. It's in the same section as the soy sauce, and you can read those. A low sodium soy sauce, and maybe you can dilute that with a little bit of vinegar. So if the say the recipe calls for a tablespoon of it, you use a teaspoon of it, and the rest of it could be added. You could add water or just a little more of your vinegar to give them that oomph in the flavor.
Very good. Thank you. So again, we still have 3 or 4 minutes, and so I was curious about you were talking about the items in the freezer section, and I know that they've come so far compared whenever I was a kid growing up with how they froze things. But do things that are frozen generally have less sodium than things that are in cans?
Oh, definitely. Frozen foods are basically what they do with frozen foods is they pick it and they freeze them immediately. And so there's actually no added salt to them. Whatever is naturally occurring in those fruits and vegetables is what is in it, in the frozen section. So that is the next best alternative to use other than the fresh. So your fresh fruits and vegetables are the best. The next best are your frozen fruits and vegetables. And the next best or the least acceptable would be your canned fruits and vegetables. But within the canned fruits and vegetables, monitor how much sodium is in it, see that there is no potassium salt added to it, try to get a low sodium without the potassium in it. And then worst comes to worst, if you need to soak your beans in water and use them, then that's the way you will go.
Okay, let's go. We have another question. Where do you find the Asian cooking substitute ponzu? Is it a powder or a liquid?
It is a liquid, and it is in the same section where you find your soy sauce and things like that. It is in the same aisle, in the same section you will find it. And it is called ponzu, and what they do is they do use a little bit of soy sauce in it, but at the same time they add the flavoring from citrus fruits, maybe some lime juice or a little bit of orange juice and vinegar, and that's how they bring the flavor in.
Okay. What are the pros and cons of using the substitute meats that are available today?
So that's a very, very good question, Cher. A lot of people are now turning to those substitute meats, which are processed meats. And of course, any kind of processed foods have a lot of salt added to them. And they have a lot of chemicals that have been added to stabilize those meats. They're not meats. So then, those especially coming from plant-based foods that are processed are very, very high in sodium, maybe high in potassium, as well as some chemicals that have been added to stabilize them. And all of these will affect your body negatively.
Do they have any protein in them generally?
So they do have, but basically what they will do is they'll generally use something like a mushroom, which is a high protein plant-based food, and then they'll crush it and they add things, they add chemicals to make it taste like meat.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And they'll add salt, a lot of salt to it to stabilize it, because a vegetable cannot survive without that. It will rot.
Yes. Yes.
So right. So any kind of processed foods, whether it is animal-based or plant-based, I generally tell people try to avoid it as much as possible. I think there's one product out there, and I forget the name right now. I know I mentioned it earlier in my other presentations, but right now it has just gone out the door.
Well, they'll have to come to Kidney Kin Foodies, and
there you go. You come to the next session in November, and we'll repeat those questions.
That's right. Well, Adina, thank you so much for sharing your large, expansive knowledge base with us. I would love to have lunch with you sometime. I would just love to just watch how you talk about different foods. And I always love spending time with you. And thank you very much for sharing everything today.
Thank you so much, Cher, for having me. And it's always a pleasure working with you guys. It's always a pleasure coming and presenting for us. And that's very, very close and dear to my heart.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Love you guys.
Again.
And a shout out to our corporate mission partners for making this happen.